Unit 4, Social Psychology. 11.1 Socialization. Socialization is incredibly important in social psychology. What is socialization? Socialization is the process of how people learn the beliefs, customs, and appropriate behaviors of a society or group. If you are not properly socialized, this makes your life incredibly difficult. Can you imagine a 5-year-old child going to school and they've not been taught not to hit, not to bite, how to share with friends? If they've not learned these things, it'll be difficult for them to fit into society. And many studies have shown that people who are not appropriately socialized for their society struggle for the rest of their lives to fit in. They always have this sense that I don't fit in with the rest of my society, and many of them respond in different ways. Some of them either retract from society and live like hermits. Others try and be rebellious by engaging with either a subculture that pushes them outside of the bounds of their own culture to try and find that sense of belonging. In some of it, it even shows as a form of rebellion. So let's jump back and have a look at what socialization is. Remember, it's that process of learning to be a participating member of a society, and it's known as socialization. So you have to a certain extent, conform to fit into the norms of your society. If you live in Samoa, wearing a sarong as a man is going to be seen as totally normal. If you walk down the street in Australia wearing a sarong, people might actually look at you funny. But it's because of the socialization of our society. And in the process of social control, it regulates our behavior and brings about conformity to the norms and laws of a society. You hear it many times in Australia when people say, hey, don't come over here and try and make us do things the way you did it back home. You have to do it the way we do it in Australia. This is actually a form of socialization, and the Australian government actually actively socializes people. I don't know if you know, but the Australian government actually requires immigrants, especially if you want to become a citizen, to sign up to an Australian values system and to acknowledge that those values are the values that you espouse and that you support as a person residing in Australia. Now, there are two types of socialization. The first one we'll look at is primary socialization. Primary socialization is that socialization you have inside the home. This is where you learn to share. Nobody usually ends up being generous from the word go. Some personality types are more prone to be generous, but you have to be taught to be generous and not just fight for your own rights. And the person who does it is called the socialization agent. The socialization agent, in most cases, is the parent. Many parents teach their children the first manners. Say thank you, say please, these are table manners, this is how you dress, this is how you conduct yourself. Don't run into the street. All of those social ideas that you have in your head were taught by a socialization agent. And if you see someone who does not conform to these values that you've been taught, you go, oh, they're a weirdo. Why are they acting this way? Because your home has taught you how to be socialized. Various homes do it to a different extent. Some homes actually love a little bit of rebellion in their children and would teach that. Other homes treat their children in a way that teaches absolute conformity is how you get things. Now, we kind of need both in society to keep a society mobile, but the impacts of primary socialization are very important. It makes a kid disciplined or undisciplined in some cases. Primary socialization helps a kid to control his or her behavior. Primary socialization helps if there is no conflict amongst agents of socialization. So you can teach your child, we don't speak to other people that way, but if you allow siblings to fight with each other, that will kind of change it. But primary socialization teaches you how to speak to people. That's why some people immediately start fighting. Other people draw back and try to talk it out just because of the way they've been socialized. Informal and formal ways of primary socialization are most important. Now, if you've grown up going to church, you would know that you have to sit still and pay attention to what's being said in church. If you come to school, you are taught that, but that is not always your primary form of socialization. The primary socialization happens within the home. So as a teacher, I understand the frustration of getting kids already formed by their primary socialization coming into school, and now you have to work with whatever that primary socialization was. You've experienced it in yourself when you were in primary school. You would have seen some kids who are not well socially socialized, because they would all the time buck the trend in the classroom. They would disrupt learning. They would not conform, but that harps back to their primary socialization. Now, secondary socialization is way more complex. That is when the child moves from outside the home into the world. That secondary socialization happens a lot in school. Those primary teachers are amazing. They are actually the ones who tame the wild ones so that you can socially conform and actually sit in a room and learn together. We have many other secondary socialization agents, like television, for instance. You might look at the show, watch the show The Good Doctor, which is a drama, and you would have an idea of how it works in The Good Doctor. But the reality of working in an emergency room looks more like that, and it is a really messy experience for a person, which is not the same, but your socialization tells you what it's like. If you look at a show like CSI or any crime scene investigation show, you've got very highly intelligent, attractive people who wear body armor and cool clothing while they work with their special torches and things to see the blood on the walls. But the reality is more like this. You're dressed in a hazmat suit and you're picking up pieces of glass and trying to lift a fingerprint, which is virtually impossible to do effectively. Very different ideas of what your socialization creates. And that is where we've got a lot of conflict in young people as well. Like if you grow up thinking you have to look like a Victoria's Secret model, or as the young men, you have to be ripped to be acceptable, but you are just a goofy teenager who loves one-liners and making gestures with your hands to show how cool you are, and using all the cool words that you need to show. Those two things don't come together very well. But you've got this ideal in your head of what it's going to be, but the reality is usually very different. But that is part of socialization, and that kind of rolls onto lots of career decisions that students make. They've got this idea of what they're going to do because of what they're watching on TV, and then it turns out being something completely different. Another big influencer at this stage is social media. As you know, social media has lots and lots of influence on our lives. The number of Dude Perfect shows you might watch where these guys do trick shots, that consumes a lot of what people do. If you remembered bottle flipping, that was very much secondary socialization by social media through YouTube. We have lots of secondary socialization, things that are fads that come through that shape who we are. The YouTubers you listen to, the things you put in your mind and allow in your mind through social media socializes you all the time. Now, what is the difference between primary and secondary socialization? Remember, primary socialization is the family is the first agent. Those are the social skills you learn and how you are shaped at home. Usually, hopefully, a child gets unconditional love there. it gives them a very limited view on society because it's the view of their family. And the learning is informal. Sometimes you sit in your parents' lap and they teach you something and you do something together on the iPad. That's very much informal learning. But when you look at secondary socialization, now the family is not the social agent, but the peer group, the school. All these sources change what your child does. We all know about the really good kid who became friends with a really naughty kid, and then they went down that track because the secondary socialization has influenced the child. Now, a child does not get the same treatment as in the family. That's why you will behave perfectly at home and go misbehave at you will behave perfectly at school but misbehave at home because they'll love you anyway because of the unconditional love. But you know that if you misbehave in your social circle, that will lead to rejection because you don't have the same type of level of acceptance that you've got at home. But it's always ironic that we treat the people at home worse than the people who are our friendship group, but the people at home usually love us more than our friendship group, if they don't backstab you. Now, a kid gets a wider view of society. This secondary socialization shows you more of what is going on the outside. The learning happens formally and informally. So learning happens formally in school, where you are taught, you are forced to wear your uniform, cut your hair, walk in a certain way, go into a class a certain way, do things a certain way. You are shaped by that. But also informally, because there are certain unspoken rules. I always love watching girls who've been homeschooled come into a schooling system where they've not been accustomed to dealing with the queen bee. Like when you do homeschooling at home, you can say whatever comes in your head and the family will take it. Or not take it, but you know they'll love you anyway. If you come into a schooling situation, the queen bee would wear something, and this kid coming from a homeschooling situation would feel free to share their opinion of what the queen bee is wearing. If it's not a favorable opinion, she does not understand that that is going to cause major social ructions for her because she's not been socialized in a schooling system. So your socialization has a lot to do with how you view the world and how you interact with it. Now, what I'd like you to do is to please go onto Google Classroom. You've already been enrolled. Would you go and answer those questions for us to see that you really understand what is happening with socialization? Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.